And I'm super excited because we're going to bring on our first guest ever. First guest ever on the Scots on the Rocks Politica podcast. We haven't had guests so far. I don't even think we were going to have. And then we said, no, this will get that much more interesting, that much more three-dimensional.
Yeah, why not?
Do it, right? So our guest tonight is Patrick Clark Davis. He is from the great town of Orange, Massachusetts. Orange is a small town to the west of where we're talking from right now, about a half hour west. And it is along the Route 2, what we in Massachusetts call the Mohawk Trail. It is the entrance as you head west into the Great Pioneer Valley, the Connecticut River Valley. It's a wonderful, wonderful community. And tonight, Patrick wanted to come on and talk about the state of education funding, public education funding, and a little bit about his role on the school committee there in Orange. And it's an excellent opportunity for our regional listeners to get a sense for some particularly rural development issues as it pertains to public ed here in Massachusetts, which might even be particularly interesting to our more urban constituents that listen to the show on a regular basis. And I believe he's just left the desk. Here he comes back. These days of Zoom. There he is. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Patrick Clark Davis. How you doing?
Hi, folks. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Struggling to find a good angle for this light above my head because it's the only light that's in this room because this is an old-ass house, so it's just kind of like...
It's interviewing in the days of Zoom.
It is Zooming. Yes, we are Zooming. That's a fact.
It's the voice that matters.
Thanks, boys, for having me on. Really appreciate it. I'm a proud member of the 2nd Franklin District here in Western New England. There's a...
and you're, as I understand it, on the school committee for, is it the Maher Regional School District?
Yeah. Yep. I'm a former town finance committee member. I'm on the school committee. I've been on the elementary school committee, and I do a lot of volunteerism in the community. So it's kind of a wild time for our kids, and we're facing, like a lot of other small communities, a lot of financial strain from lack of taxation at the base level, and there's definitely some very discrete issues with Chapter 70 funding and how SPED is addressed. I know there's a lot of folks at the state and, at the administrative level who are being very conscientious about this issue for Central Massachusetts. We are the poorest area in the state. The stretch between basically Leominster, Gardner, Athol, Orange, and Irving are the most disadvantaged places in the state financially. So we're working through COVID, which that into itself is a discrete challenge, but we're trying to, at the same time, keep our kids educated and come up with new challenges to fund education. And I think that the state reps and the senators from our district, at least, are, they're engaged. Rep Susie Whips has done pretty much yeoman's work up to date. And I love Susie. She's a fantastic advocate for the community. Joe Comerford, our senator from Northampton, she's really put her foot down on the pedal and tried to really help us. It's not a liberal or a progressive argument that children need education. It's also neither a progressive or conservative discussion about whether they need to eat food.
Yeah, right.
So we're doing both of those things. I think we're doing them really, really well. Our district in whole is not fully regionalized, which is a discussion that I believe needs to be undertaken so that elementary and high school can be part of the same combined district.
Oh, I didn't realize that, Patrick. So that means that your Maher High School is regionalized, but only the high school, and the elementary schools for Petersham and Orange. Is it Petersham, Orange, and Warwick?
Yes.
Yeah. So those elementary schools are just, towns are on their own. They're completely funded by property taxes or education funding that's appropriated.
It's department of the town stuff. So elementary is a department of the town. Regional is regional. Sorry, I got the hiccups, by the way. I don't know where it came from. It just like happened like 4 minutes ago. So I'm
Why
eating.
not? Why not while you're podcasting?
Have here in front of me. But what I wanted to talk about, and I want you guys' opinion on this too, certainly, the opportunities that we have to create new revenue opportunities so that we can pay for these unfunded mandates that districts have. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I would say broadly, and I'm prejudiced because I work primarily in the engagement of starting businesses and programs that support business. The only true organic growth to create municipal tax base is primarily, but not exclusively, homegrown commercial taxes, new business, right? And without that, you have two simple choices. You either increase taxes on your residents, which is only fair and possible, or one or the other, if your residents have the capacity to pay that. Otherwise, it doesn't work. There is no other way to do it, in my opinion. It's either that or reallocation from somewhere else.
Well, a lot of these towns here in rural Western Mass, there's no tax base.
Right.
There's also, I think, a reluctance to look at unique opportunities to create tax base because it's kind of a non-gentrified area, but I will say it's becoming a little more gentrified. The median home income in Orange has gone up, and I mean cost of real estate, not home income. They both increased, but income's up 10%. Real estate's up probably 22.5% to 25%, which is a big number. And that's because people are moving in from other parts of the state and out of state to a place where they can purchase a home that is disconnected from, kind of like an urban area where they may feel as they're at higher risk for some kind of potential loss. And we need that to continue because business follows gentrification. I mean, look at
Patrick. Let me ask you: of those people, I don't know if these numbers, if you know them, but are most of them of the professional class, and they're commuting farther by moving there to a job that's somewhere not close to the school district, I'm going to assume.
Yes, that, or they're completely and totally virtual.
Okay, that would be the other way, right? Yeah.
So we're building a new elementary school at Dexter Park and Fisher Hill, which is huge. The town voted to support that effort, which is going to obviously have a positive impact on the students and the faculty that work there. It's a huge thing. The MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, gave us almost 80% reimbursement rate of taxation to build that building, which is huge. And it will allow us to get out of the nightmare that is the Dexter Park School and give us the ability to hopefully increase the quality of education across the board for all of our students, which is what obviously our goal is. But that elementary department, as I said, separate from the regional department. There's a big discussion about kids that are either foster kids or sped kids, that because the Commonwealth doesn't let Chapter 70 money follow those kids from the community that they come from. So we end up paying for that as a town. So when there's foster kids that get brought in from, from DCF or whatever, the town has to pick up the tab. Sometimes those are very expensive. And I would love to see the state kind of take a step back and look at that formulaically and see how it works.
Now, no, correct me if I'm wrong. Those kids, in other circumstances, money does follow the student, doesn't it? Like, for instance, in school choice?
100%.
Okay, so, and we should also, to add further context for our listeners, our public ed funding, Chapter 70 legislation, they were working on reforms to Chapter 70 before the zombie apocalypse hit. And it's in some kind of a stage of being assessed or being worked on.
Yeah, it was literally weeks before COVID. I mean,
they were going to vote, right?
Well, I don't know if they were going to vote. Governor Baker came out with a recommendation saying they were going to modify the Chapter 70 formula, and that the legislature, the administration, and DESE were going to look at it. And believe me, Governor Baker is a good man, and he has good intentions. But unfortunately, his priorities right now are completely askew because the public health is his main interest. So he's got to do that. So we'll see what happens with that. I haven't talked to any legislators or administrators about where that conversation is at this time, so I can't comment on it. But I believe that there will be some kind of a come to the middle on that in the future. I think the Commonwealth is very earnest in their desire to make education more equitable. When you live out here in the middle of nowhere and you have no income because you have no jobs, because you have no big companies. I mean, Rodney Hunt is gone. These big manufacturing companies, they're all gone by the wayside for years. Rodney's actually now opening back up and hiring. So hopefully that will be something that is positive. But when you lose that tax base, there's no way to recover. Unless
that's just it is, and it's not an overnight sensation, but the only way, I'll keep coming back to it, the only way to see organic growth, so that in the end, as a municipality, that municipality has, unencumbered municipal tax money that they didn't have the day before, is organic growth of the commercial tax base. Easier said than done, totally costs money before you make money, but it is the only way. It's either that or you just tax your residents out of existence, which many of our cities and towns, both urban, suburban, and rural, up and down the Route 2 corridor that you described just moments ago, a lot of us, our cities and towns to varying degrees, have been doing exactly that.
And I feel a lot of
Patrick, if I can weigh in, Patrick, Scott Graves, so I'm a city councilor in Gardner. We feel it too. I mean, you sound like you're preaching to the choir to me, because we make the same complaints or the same concerns that you're making. And part of, I think that maybe the question I would ask you, and this question I ask myself a lot, and I'm no education expert, but in the more affluent communities, they're spending, what are they spending? $12,000 per kid. And then in the communities, because they're rich. And then the communities out here, we're spending something like, I don't know what it is, $6,000 to $8,000 maybe per kid. So the unfairness is just built into a class system almost, where if you happen to live in Dover or Lexington, Concord, you're going to get, here's where I'm going with it though. Is spending more money, what do you think about it? Is spending more money per student all that important? If you have a great teacher with less money as opposed to a horrible teacher with more money, maybe maybe we make out with less money, but the fairness just doesn't seem like it's jiving to me.
It's a great question. I think honestly, you could answer it in probably three ways. I'm not sure which the right one is, but I think it could be answered in three ways. The first is you can always do less with more.
We have to.
Right? The other is you can always do more with less. And I think we have an expectation of our staff that if we take good care of them, we honor them, we pay them, we provide them with what they're contractually obligated to, receive for their work, and we support them, that they're going to do good things. Sometimes when you have less and do more, great things happen. The third thing is there is a disproportionate distribution of wealth in the Commonwealth relative to the Chapter 70 formula. And I'm not going to speak about specific communities, but there are some communities where reimbursement levels are 120 to 150% more than the rural communities.
That's right.
And they also have the capacity to go to town meeting, like happened in a community in Essex County, where you walk in, there's 700 people at the meeting outside during COVID, and they vote a 2.5 override. They're going to plant arborvitae over here. They're going to put up this over here. They're going to, whatever. They're just like, whatever, just charge us for it. It's fine.
Yeah.
I went to the Orangetown meeting this year, which I go to every year, and I sat in a lawn chair next to my bride, socially distanced from everybody else. And this community stood up and voted to build a new elementary school. And the most compelling argument that was made at that meeting was by George Willard, who used to be a town selectman. And he said, somebody did this for me, so I'm going to do it for these kids. So there's a little bit of like hearkening back to the old way of thinking that I think sometimes needs to be kind of pushed forward. Things are expensive. There's no question.
That's another problem.
And the state doesn't make it any cheaper. And I'm not going to defame the state. I'm just saying that, this is the most expensive state in the entire country to pave road. Okay. It's $1 million a mile.
And it's among the highest to build schools.
Yeah.
It's one of the situations that we just kind of find ourselves in. So the only way to navigate it is to be reasonable, right? So if something doesn't seem reasonable, then I don't want the taxpayers to do it. If something doesn't seem reasonable to a staff member at the high school because they're afraid of COVID, then I don't want them to do it. We have to be a community. And I think that our very small, thoughtful community has responded really, really well to this crisis. And I'm being completely apolitical here. I'm just being honest. I think we've done a really good job. And I'm very proud of the people that I've had the privilege to work with during this really difficult, insane time. And hopefully we can get through it and we can motor on, but the Commonwealth has to come back to the table on Chapter 70. They have to come back to the table on reimbursement rates. They have to come back to the table on food access, and that's a big thing too. Like right now, I've got 600 kids at Maher that I think our number is close to 50, if not more than 60%, who are getting food every single day, twice a day. And they're delivering the food, or they're doing drop-off access points, or they're doing community access points. And that big stressor for the food department, because can't have non-shelf stable stuff just going out there for kids to cup whenever they decide to go get their sandwich, right? You can't do that. So, but we're doing the best we can, and it's a huge stressor. We're doing it, and we're staying remote. And I think
we're seeing that a lot here too in Gardner. The food for school program, which was in addition to anything that the Gardner CAC and other organizations that throughout the year are always working on the issue of hunger and homelessness. They could not, and this continues, they cannot distribute meals fast enough.
And believe me, we want to distribute all the meals to all the kids. It's just really, really hard. So I give props to our food service staff and to Jackie Dillenbach, who's the director of food service for the district. She's fantastic. I give props to the superintendent for supporting our staff in that effort. We've got great volunteers. We've got some public people. But food access right now is a huge issue for kids. So beyond funding, we've got to feed these kids, and then we've got to take care of their educational requirements. And right now it's about as challenging as it's ever been. So we'll see what happens. But man, it's rough. And the staff are feeling it, the faculty feel it, the staff of the administration feel it, the school committee feels it. I just hope that Charlie Baker and Commonwealth continue to support education and make sure that our rural communities can get what they need to take care of their students and their faculty and staff.
I'm generally
we're hearing
guy,
too that Patrick. I don't know.
Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was just going to say, this is going to, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, and I hope I'm dead wrong on it, but we're hearing that, this problem is going to, the money problem is just going to, it's kind of like snowballing. So we're looking at fiscal year like 22 is going to be a problem. It might be worse than it is now, because we're kind of like we're using the Band-Aid approach, borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, kind of using, smokes and mirrors on budgets and all that, just like you said, Patrick, just to get by, just to survive this thing. But it's at some point, it might just fall apart and get worse instead of better, money-wise, I'm talking.
I had a conversation with a state rep today, not from my district. I said, what if I could just get $350,000? Forget circuit breaker, forget all that stuff, which you know all about because you've been involved in this process. I'm like, what if I could get it earmarked for $350,000? So the state's got roughly $3 billion in cash reserves right now. So that would be 1/10 of 1%.
Yeah.
If I had 1/10 of 1%, I'd have a level funded budget. All of my staff would be back in my building, and I'd be able to take care of my students and their technology needs at 1/10 of 1%.
Not asking for too much.
Doesn't seem like a lot, does it?
No.
The problem is it's never going to happen.
Here's some further interesting characteristics to the current budget situation, which will add some context to what Patrick's saying. In a Rotary meeting last week, our state rep proudly mentioned that the actual numbers for the fiscal year we're in so far, July 1 to October 1 thus far, estimated revenues were anticipated, the revised estimate was significantly reduced because the state felt like due to COVID, it was just simply not going to come close to meeting intended numbers that had been planned for the year before. But he was very proud to say that we've all but entirely made our numbers so far for the year, that the second half of the year, of course, can change drastically. But so far, the state had made its mark, minus a few percentage points. At the same time, I work closely with several, and they're different types of state agencies, both of which have not received their budget yet for the year, even though money is flowing. And so there's all these different messages that we're getting. And then, Patrick, you just alluded to a third, right, in this example where you're talking to another district state rep and talking about this earmark. And I just wonder, one would assume that even if we did well in the first 2 quarters of this fiscal year, that the state's leery to spend any money because they're not sure if the whole fiscal scenario is going to fall apart as the second wave of the pandemic comes. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that, but it's really germane to all of our short-term budget problems in every single city and town that's having a problem.
Of course they are. I mean, there's no question that they're concerned. In my district, my state rep, Susanna Whips, she is a bulldog. She goes and fights for us every day. I have lots of other friends who occupy office in the Commonwealth. I use them as a barometer to try to find out what's happening in like neighboring districts and communities, because that's important for me to understand, because that's not germane to my purview, right? So I ask questions. I think it's prudent for an elected official who wants to understand what's happening around them to ask questions. So I ask questions. Sometimes I get answers. Sometimes I get no answer. That's fine. But in this neighboring district, they are freaking out. They're freaking out. Here in our district in 2nd Franklin, I don't think we're freaking out. I think that we're going to be okay. And I know that Susie always goes to bat for us. So, that's a non-issue. And Senator Comerford has demonstrated herself to be extremely germane, but also extremely competent. She's a very mellow person. So I dig that about her. She's very kind of like, give me the questions, I'll give you the answers. If I don't have them, I'll get it back to you. That's just totally how I function. That's awesome. I think in general, we do have a concern right now that revenue projections are not going to meet basically the budget earmark for the entire Commonwealth. And I'm afraid with the uptick in COVID activity that people are going to stop paying their taxes because they're not going to be able to afford to live. And that's a big deal. That's a huge deal.
Right.
So that affects every rung on the ladder. That affects education, that affects public service, that affects fire department, that affects police department, that affects the town's ability to operate, just looking at Orange. So I'm hoping that we get through this, get this vaccine out, and, we can go back to some semblance of normal. But I don't necessarily feel that we're going to be back instructionally face-to-face in our district until probably well after Martin Luther King Day.
I would imagine so, because even with even with the vaccine being distributed quickly, you still have this pretty significant time period where the smartest thing to do is to socially distance and wear a mask and continue to stay the course on that, because it takes some time for a vaccine to really take effect. It has to be in the right tipping point, number of people, and also be in them long enough to have taken an effect, and all that kind of stuff. Even as numbers.
Give the governor a tremendous amount of credit for being as bold and brave as he's been, to be as conservative as he has. He tried to push the issue with education, which frankly to me doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like you have a 10 to 5 curfew and you can't go to the bar, but kids have to go back hybrid.
Here's one for you. In our town, just yesterday, we received letters, and we've been receiving frantic letters for several days this week. Several children in the grade 4 were diagnosed, but the final decision that came through is that just the grade 4 kids will go full remote immediately, and everybody else goes to school.
Yeah, we made a decision early on, before it was popular, to stay remote as long as humanly possible. And we're one of the only districts in the Commonwealth that has chosen to do that successfully.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not a popular outcome. There are people that are pretty upset they did that. But the really frank issue for us is none of us want to be responsible for burying anybody's children.
Right.
So if we have the technology, which we do, every student in our district, elementary and from 4th grade up, everybody has a Chromebook. Okay. So teachers are online and they're working with their students every day. Both of my learners, one who's going to be 18 and the other one who's going to be 16, who are both exceptional students, yay, they're online 7:45 in the morning every day. And I had to rewire like the entirety of the upstairs of the house so that they could have like plug-in data instead of wireless data. Because I'm like, all right, so you need a cable, dad's office is screwed, he's going downstairs. So I put up a touchscreen Lenovo desktop on the wall in the kitchen, and I have my Chromebook, and I just go work downstairs. They're wired, I'm wireless. My day sucks. I spend most of it on my phone, and I'm sure I'm not the only person because the data throttling has been crazy during this time because there's so many more people.
That's right. Yeah. We're really getting to see what that infrastructure.
Right. Wire the internet during the day, and I personally am on coax. I have a T1 line, comes into my house from Comcast, which is Spectrum, and I'm the last house on the hill. So I hit the head end. They ran a wire up to my house. I plug it into the modem, and middle day, my speeds, 2 megabits a second. I'm paying for 100. So everybody down the street, every kid and every mom and dad in every house between that head end and my house is sucking up my internet. Yeah. So like imagine there are families where there are kids who can't get online.
Yeah.
And that sucks. Now we can't feed them. We can't teach them. And they can't come to school. So we have to figure out a way to remediate that problem. And what we've been doing in a partnership with Verizon is giving out hotspots. So you can sign up to get a free Wi-Fi Verizon internet hotspot. You can take it to your apartment where your kid is learning. You can put it on the table. The kid probably knows how to set it up. You don't. But we give infrastructural support for that. And a big shout out to Suzer IT for everything they've done for the district here. And they serve lots of other districts in the area to make sure that kids have access. But we have kids sitting in the back seat of their mom's car, the library, in the middle of winter, right? It's becoming cold. We can admit that. With like dirty laundry and like McDonald's packages and like crap. And they're sitting in the back seat. They're taking a Zoom meeting so they can go to school. It's just it's a crazy, hellacious time.
Well, it's one of those 1,000 different ways that the pandemic has reminded us the weaknesses in our in our all of it, in the society, in our infrastructure, in the way we do things, in our routine.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You know, I mean, all these issues that were the root of a lot of these issues were there before the pandemic hit. It's just that the pandemic sort of, for one, it made us all have to literally sit down at home and and start to really consider ourselves, right? And the groups of people that we're in our community, and it's hard to ignore things when all you got to do for a little while is think and have to recognize what's happening, right? You know, I wonder though if this, and I'm wondering what all you guys think about this, think of it like a reset. We weren't quite there yet with redirecting Chapter 70. I wonder if this is an opportunity for whatever comes after this. It's little good does it do us now, but in the end, that this is a bit of a reset to improve upon Chapter 70 at a whole other different level of capacity for everybody, simply because we've had to go through this.
What's that?
You have an idea on that topic?
No, like I said, I just think Beacon Hill's treading water, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm very fiscally conservative. Always been on the city council, and I'm just leery of the house of cards falling on. I hope I'm wrong, but I think they're treading water up there. I mean,
when you say that, do you think that it's a mischaracterization? What I was told as an example a week ago, that tax revenues by and large have actually met their goals, and that coupled with the fact the rainy day fund is in good shape, that you think that that's a lie, or is that?
I just think the projections are off. I think, like I said, I think next we might be okay for fiscal year 21, but I just don't think about it. The economy's literally been shut down since March, and it's getting shut down again. The holiday spending season is going to be a disaster. I don't know. Nobody's lying. I think they're just not conservative projections. That's just my opinion. I mean, I'm not a money guy. I have the funny feeling that it's just it's financially it's not as rosy as we're being told. That's how I feel. We got to be ready for it. I've been saying it since March. We got to be ready for it. I wanted to keep, like in Gardner, for instance, I wanted to keep all our stabilization money for a rainy day. I wanted to keep all the free cash for a rainy day, because I just think something's going to hit money-wise. The schools and the discretionary funding is always the first to go. So for us, the discretionary funding is always teachers, firefighters, and police officers, because Patrick mentioned at the beginning, we have mandates from the state, especially with SPED and some other things with the schools, that you can't touch. You have to fund it. The state doesn't care how you just have to figure it out. And if you're in a community like ours that doesn't want to do a Proposition 2.5 override, and you got to come up with the money for these mandates, you're in trouble, and you got to lay people off. And I hate to say it, but that might be what's going to be coming down the pike. If the money's tight, it's always non-discretionary that's going to get dumped. And that's just a disaster for a community.
Well, and that's all a bigger argument for getting our shit together with Chapter 70.
Let's hope, yeah.
With a serious rethink about how that money is distributed.
And I think the viewer might not realize what 2.5 is. And Proposition 2.5 is the law that says, you mentioned real estate taxes going up, and all of this happens on the backs of the homeowners, because your real estate taxes go up every single year to fund the budget. 87 or a ridiculous amount of our revenue is from homeowners on real estate taxes, but you can only go up 2.5. The levy can only go up 2.5% per year, and if you want to go above that, you have to have the people vote on it for an override. And it's not a very popular thing. Gardner hasn't been that successful, I don't think, ever, to do a Proposition 2.5 override. I think if Orange did it, that's unbelievable. I didn't hear that, but because the homeowners are struggling to pay their real estate taxes every year, they go up.
Well, especially in a city like ours where
you're asking them to vote, then you're asking them to vote for an additional increase.
And you're doing so in communities where a lot of the young people are not coming back to live here.
Right.
They grow up and they leave. Our population in Gardner has been stable for decades. However,
and getting older.
They're skewing older, and so we have a higher percentage every decade of people on a fixed income. So even small increases to their taxes, it's not like my mortgage bill is going up by $50 a month. It's more like you got to come up with all this money all at once, or biannually. And I'm on a fixed income, and my fixed income hasn't gone up in 15 years.
Yeah, they're maybe getting a COLA increase of 1% if they're lucky, and all the expenses are going 2, 3, 4, 5%. We talked earlier about the expense to build a school, or just the expense of running a school. The expenses just, we're building a new school too, Patrick, an elementary school, and the projection was like $90 million for an elementary school, and I'm looking at it just going, you got to be kidding me! Like, somebody's doing really great. I always say the contractors or somebody's doing really great, because the expenses just keep going up every single year. They go up. They raise.
Well, ours is because it's waterfront property.
That too, but the people's income's not going up commensurate with expenses. Well, so when you raise real estate taxes, like you said, people on a fixed income, or they're lucky to even have a job, never mind get a raise, and then to ask them to do a 2.5 override, it's almost impossible.
So our 2.5 failed.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I thought you said it passed.
No, we had a meeting, town meeting, and it was a discussion about approving the school building opportunity, and then passing a what I would call an electorable option for people to come back to a special town meeting and vote for the 2.5. But the 2.5 had nothing to do with the school. The school was already pre-negotiated, long-term debt financing excluded. So that one on the cherry sheet, and that was excluded borrowing. But when it came to the override that was needed for budgetary stuff for the school district regionally, that was voted down. Okay. I can say we have not terminated any services. There have been some employees that have chosen to leave. There have been small reductions in staff. The union is pretty angry, and the MTA is doing what the MTA does, which is, really push the buttons of the select board and the regional school district and the elementary school district. But these are very challenging times. So I wouldn't for a moment excuse the union's capacity to have a voice at the table to advocate on behalf of their employees. So it's a very challenging time.
Yeah.
And we're doing, everyone, I think, who gives a crap, I don't want to be glib, but I think we're all doing everything we possibly can to be respectful to everybody. There's no animosity. And the Commonwealth is the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth moves at the speed of trees. Okay? I mean, it's literal. And I'm not being disrespectful, but the Commonwealth moves at the speed of trees. The district and the regional government and the town government here, they have a responsibility to make decisions to keep people safe and keep them employed. And if they can't, then they have to be transparent about that and move on. So I feel like we've done a really good job of doing that. We've gotten 3 or or 5 parents that have filed a complaint with DESE because we're still going remote and we have not gone hybrid. And I would say to those parents, if they're listeners, there's no good way right now for us to do anything other than be hybrid if we had the staff. We have a lot of staff that have chosen not to return to school. And there are a lot of folks who are out there in the community who will not come back to work or fill those spots because they're afraid of their own personal health and well-being. And I'm not the judge and jury. Can't be. So if it was tomorrow morning and DESE came in and said Maher Regional High School has to go back to a completely full hybrid model, we would not have the staffing capacity to open the door.
Yeah.
So I like I said before, I would much rather not be responsible for burying students and staff and faculty than come back to school understaffed and not have the capacity to take care of our kids. And the psychological implications of this for our children are huge. So they're coming back to an environment that they miss terribly, that's going to look like nothing they've ever seen before. So it's going to be a big burden.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're rounding up on an hour here in our show, and this has been an extremely compelling conversation. And it's good to know because and I'll just say from a personal standpoint, Patrick, you know that I've had business interests off and on for a little over a decade, specific to the town of Orange, but more generally speaking, that part of the Pioneer Valley has always been near and dear to my heart. I've gotten to know many, 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 many people there. And it is, in one sense, an honor that all of us that are on this podcast and all of our friends and neighbors in all of our communities here in North Central Mass, that we all live here, and that fate has given us this time period to all have to work together. So in that sense, thank God we are all here.
I appreciate that and agree with that terribly.
You know, because
a
somehow we're
tough-
all going to get through this no matter what. Now, the question is, how cool is it all going to look in the end? But we're here and we're talking about it, and our listeners and all our other friends are starting to talk about it too. So
I tell people all the time that the north central portion of Massachusetts is the most independent and autocratic and thoughtful part of the Commonwealth. And when you think about people raising barns and taking care of their neighbors, regardless of their politics or their wealth or their health or well-being, I feel like we're really privileged to live in the bastion of just kind of common sense democracy that we should be living in this Commonwealth. And I remind people often the United States of America is a republic.
Yep.
It's not a democracy, it's a republic. So we have an incumbent responsibility to take care of one another. I think we do a really good job of that up here in the North Quabbin. So I'm very, very pleased to live here. Thank you for the opportunity to be on the show. You guys are great, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Happy Thanksgiving. And yeah, maybe there will be another time to avail my opportunity to participate in your conversation.
always a pleasure to be talking with you, and thank you for being the inaugural guest on
Thanks.
Scots on the Rocks Politica.
Thanks, guys.
Patrick Clark Davis, school committee
Thanks a lot.
member. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Take care.
Well, rounding out another exciting hour of Scots on the Rocks Politica. I am your host, Scott M. Graves.
And I'm Scott J. Graves. Don't forget that J.
Don't forget that J in there. You have listened to episode 6 of Scots on the Rocks Politica. Good night.
Good night.